Welcome back to another edition of the Pear Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Alex. I got Kati in the house, and today we have Gord Sheppard. Gord, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself quickly, and then we're just going to get right into the gold of the episode.
Sure. My name is Gord Sheppard. I'm the CEO of Executive Wins. My whole goal is to help leaders get better at leadership. And the way that I approach that is through a positive approach to give them a structured way to get more wins by using that structure to look back at the past wins that they've had before, and then use that structure to go forward in a positive way in the future. It's been super rich. I've got to meet dozens and dozens of people, and that's also fed into the Executive Wins podcast, where again, it's leaders coming on to share their business wins so that other leaders can learn from them. And so I've got to meet a wide variety of people there and just honestly get super inspired. Like on episode 2, Karen Unlum was on there and I was interviewing her about her biggest wins. And she said, we like to do wellness check-ins at the beginning of every meeting with our staff, and that helps for attraction and retention for remote staff. That's very important for her. And then she went on to say, I said, well, why do you do that? She says, well, it's because of our values. And she said, our values are, we are curious, we choose courage, and we care. And so what's lucky for me is I'm out in the world helping people, but also people are helping me simply by being interviewed on the podcast. And that's sort of been allowed, it's enriched me. And suddenly I'm either really good at cocktail parties for conversation, but also that chance to then flow that forward into other situations that I'm in has been very enriching. So it's really nice to be in the middle of a very focused time on helping leaders to get better at what they do, because I really philosophically believe that when they can do that, work on themselves and their teams, and do it in a structured way, then they can build stronger organizations. And if we build stronger organizations, they can impact their customers, clients, community at the highest possible level. And that's why I get out of bed every day.
Awesome. And I think that you are perfect for podcasting because of your background in broadcasting, and your setup is great and you have a great energy. And I'm just so excited to have you on here with us. And I feel like, and I was telling Kati this yesterday, that I feel like anytime you and I talk, we really bring out the best in both of us in our conversations. So it's just such a treat to have you here. And the first question that I wanted to ask you was, what day were you born? And this will help with the rest
April
of
19th, 67. So that sort of locates me there.
You didn't have to give the year. You didn't have to age yourself like that.
Oh, I'm all good. It's so funny about owning that kind of honesty. I get in trouble for that often. I'll just sort of say it to people. But no, happy to be a centennial kid for Canada, and proud of that.
Awesome. All my favorite people are like born in April or in November. So it's no coincidence, Gord. So, dear, do you have all the information you need now?
Oh, yes. Now I'm ready to unravel everything. Have to say, though, that I've already written down something that Gord has said, and we've only just started, but flow it forward is the nicest thing I've heard yet. Like, that's the reason we're podcasting too, also to heal ourselves, but also then to flow it forward. Is that a Gordism? Did you make that up?
Oh, gosh, I wish I had. So please take it away and steal it. But that's certainly the theme of what it is. I've been paid well through the mentoring and the help I've gotten in the past. And that chance now to build people up and build them up, I'm going to say quickly. That's another certainly piece of what I do, is to expedite as many conversations as I can. So that flow it forward is really important. I'm glad you picked up on that.
I love the fact that this Executive Wins has come to fruition, because I think that it's a great mission, what you're on, changing the culture of corporations and having leaders celebrate their wins. I think is so important, because otherwise we're just, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I think that you giving people that bust their butts to try and carry a company to the next level, they really should take that moment to celebrate.
Well, and I'm glad you're mentioning that, because I just asked you two, do you have a wins list? Have you ever written it down and said, this is what we're good at and this is what we're excited about?
Oh boy, I don't think we've ever written it down.
I would say we're on a huge win streak right now, because everything that we're doing for this podcast is getting us extremely excited. We're not dragging ourselves to the computer. We're really keen on upgrading and getting the best guests and getting the best out of everything. And it's really flowed into KP Design as well. So I would say we are just on fire right now. We kind of lost a little bit of that spark in 2024. And I feel like this podcast has really helped ignite what is the best of both of us. And to me, that is the absolute biggest win.
That's super exciting.
And I'll refine it further by saying that writing down the wins to me is almost the same energy as being in the flow. And I feel like now in 2025, we're in the flow. So these things are just coming, like we're just attracting things a lot faster. And I feel like being caught up in the flow, forget to write things down. That's just not part of my DNA. That's definitely something that Alex should be doing because he's good at that stuff.
I should write down the wins, Gord, because we've had some really great wins in the last month or two. And you know what? I forgot to celebrate them. And I know
Well,
you.
and you know, so that you're saying, so it's funny. We talk about other people celebrating. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. Most people, when I ask that question, haven't written down those things. And I don't mean to make it a big exercise. I really mean like take 10 minutes. It's almost like a little journaling exercise. Write down 3 or 4 and see what that feels like. And then, of course, my interest is then if we write them down and we explore them, can we mine for gold in them and find out? I'll just go both barrels here now. This idea of, when I say I bring a structured idea to every conversation that I'm in, when I talk about wins, I actually want to know what's the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every win that we talk about. So when your audience is listening and they go to write down their wins, and I'll say it really quickly because I've been able to do that in networking. Funny enough, I can do this for a half day or a full day with a leadership team, but I can also do it in 10 minutes and transform lives literally at networking events that I'm meeting people for the first time. I'm really confident about this idea of taking, like, for example, give me an example of a win, Alex, that you had. Like, what's an example?
I think a huge win for us is whenever we launch a new website and we just have the best feeling as it goes live that it is some of the best work that we've ever done, and all that effort and hard work was loved by the client. To me, that's a huge win for us.
And again, without going super deep, you've got a vision behind that. Like when we look at strategic planning, you have a vision, a mission, there's goals, there's objectives. Like that's a strategic plan. But the vision behind that is to do your best work, which creates that kind of feeling. And that's becomes, the strategy, first piece of the strategy that I can hear. The work plan piece, there's a what, who, and when. The project starts, you're in the middle of it, you deliver it, it's up and running. The people involved are you two, right, to make that happen, plus the client. The operational component, we could go back into whatever you're using to build websites with, the copy and all those things. And finally, there's those results that you measured, and you already mentioned the result, which is we feel great about it. I'm going to assume you get paid in there somewhere. And that's me doing that in seconds. What's thrilling for me with that format now, this idea of, if anybody can take this away, this idea of strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results, it's unlimited for how far you can go. And if we can explore that past win and find out, especially around the attitudes, what was involved with getting those things, can we use it to go and get more wins in the future? So it's the mission that I'm on.
Do you want to ask a question, dear?
No.
No. Okay.
I'm soaking it in still. It takes me longer.
Yeah. I have no fear about Dead Space now just because our editing software is so good. So here I'm just like, we can take it all in. And I love what you're saying, Gord. And you reminded me again that once those projects launch, we need to take a moment, celebrate, whether it's a bottle of wine, whether it's going out for a dinner, and just giving ourselves that little reward for about a month's worth of intense energy being put towards a project, and not just be, okay, what's the next thing?
Well, and you folks have the proof in the pudding, right? You have longstanding clients. I remember you describing one of your clients to me one time, not mentioning the specific space that you mentioned, but this idea of, and then we, they didn't trust us early on, and then we did this and this and those steps that you did for them, and it paid off for them. And so the proof is in the pudding. So those, again, I love the nuancy parts of, what was that thing that made that difference with that client? And then again, accumulating them and pulling them forward.
Mm-hmm. And one of my questions, you already answered it, but I wanted to know the why behind the executive wins. And to me, that's fascinating. And you did answer that already. So it's great that you already had that built in. I think that more people need to start with their why. And I think that's one of the best books I've read in a long time. Me and Kati read it on a road trip, and it honestly blew our minds. So when we did this podcast, that's what we started. We started with the why, but the nuances of it have kind of changed as we're going through. And me and Kati, I know I'm a perfectionist and I want this podcast to be perfect, absolutely perfect, but I'm embracing the fact that it's this journey and it will never be as perfect as I want it to be. And I have to be okay with that. And I think that's one of my big lessons too.
What's the why behind your podcast? Sorry, what is it?
Oh, it's kind of a selfish why, but I don't mind saying it. My why is to have these great interactions with people and get that gold from them. And then that fills up my spiritual bank account. It makes me a better person, taking the gold from everyone along the way. Like, they're sharing it. I'm not taking it. Like, people are sharing it. And I hope to share something with them as well, that there's always this exchange, this great takeaway, and we both go away being better versions of ourselves.
Well, and you're curating gold. Like, that's such a gift to actually consolidate it. One of the crazy things I did with the transcripts from my podcast recently, just the first 3, is I threw them in ChatGPT, and I gave ChatGPT a prompt, said, pull out the best inspiring quotes and pull out the best information under the 5 categories that I mentioned. And it spat out a really precise piece that would have taken me, whatever, days or hours and hours to sort of pull out. But I found that really interesting because it distilled information that you don't pick up when you're in the full conversation. So that idea of being able to load in a transcript of anything and then get the best out of it relatively quickly so that, again, it can be shared out further and sent further faster. I'm super excited about that application of technology.
That's amazing. I'm going to take that tip away with me, because Kati and I were talking about taking some of the quotes out of our episodes.
Yep.
And it's time consuming. It's time consuming for Kati to go through it.
Yeah,
so
right into ChatGPT, said, here's, and you pound, the transcript just flies in there, and you just say, you prompt it in whatever way you want to prompt it. And then, but pull out 6 inspiring quotes from each episode or whatever. And there it is. And they're saying, like, whatever, you go to Brainy Quotes or whatever, those quote websites, it's as good as anybody that you're picking off of there, because you're hearing the gold come out, and it just consolidates it, which is really neat, because then it's the people on your podcast that are saying it, as opposed to Einstein or those types of things that we typically, yeah.
Yeah, well, and Kati makes amazing graphics and T-shirts. We always joke that's a quote, and that's for a T-shirt. And this will make your job a lot easier.
Right? Flow It Forward needs to be a T-shirt.
Right? That. I'll buy one. I'm in.
You'll buy one. It's your quote.
Okay, so Gord, I have a question here. I wrote down some stuff. What did you have to unlearn that helped you in this chapter of your life? What did you have to unlearn in your previous life to help get you to this point?
Hyper clear. You're going to relate. It was dropping the perfectionism. I did a lot of school, loved doing well in school. Those lessons I learned to do well in school did not apply in business. Good enough became a mantra a couple of years ago, and it became a great relief for the ability to get material out and get it rapidly tested, as opposed to the perfectionism. And I mean perfectionism like, I'm going to work on a website page and I'm going to worry about the hex color of the blue, which I've done. Or I'm on Fiverr and I'm like, oh, I could get that for $4 instead of $3. Like, it was just like, when I look back, I want to give myself a shake. But that's that perfectionism, insecurity underneath. There's a whole bunch to the depth of that now it's just a great joy to say, yeah, it's going out. Like, things are going out the door. Let's see what people think. And then from a business perspective, it's rapid prototyping, very rapid prototyping. I was really pleased. I'm experimenting with all forms for the Executive Wins idea. I already coach one-on-one and I work with groups, but I actually started to pull together lunches for groups of 3 executives. And I did one of those experiments recently. It was sort of mediocre. It wasn't hit out of the ballpark, but I did the experiment quickly, and then got feedback from these 3 professionals who participated in the lunch, learned a ton about them internally, which was really great, and then learned about the format and what that looks like and would that be a benefit. And, got real feedback, not me sitting in my office going, oh, I think they're going to want it every week. They come back and they're like, yeah, once a quarter, maybe. Yeah, maybe it's worth this. And that was a good experiment recently that was just like a rapid up and running. And now we know the answer, as opposed to hoping or getting stuck in writing business plans or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the greatest lessons is failing quickly and having a short-term memory. Just forget it. Just fail quickly.
That's it.
Get what you needed and go forward quickly. Done. I think in school it haunts us. Our mistakes haunt us.
The reward system doesn't apply to, I think, maybe life and business. Certainly from what I can see.
Well, that's what happens when you're told to memorize things, and then if you do a bad job memorizing them, well, you're not as smart as the other kids. I feel bad calling Kati out, but she doesn't remember anything from school. Anything.
You're lucky.
Well, you know what? The school system, and I knew it even back then, was not for me. I'm like, okay, this information does not apply to my life. It doesn't make sense. I'm not holding on to it. I travel lightly.
It served you well, though.
But I will say, though, that the memorizing thing, so I was a flute player. I have a bachelor's degree in music as a flute performer. And there were so many festivals that I had to memorize the music. because you can't go up there. It's against the rules to have, your music out there for some of them. So there was my very first one, I went up there. I was probably 12 or 13, and I got my flute up, and it's a little bit trickier because you can't even see your fingers. They're off to the side. With the piano, you can kind of, those patterns that you can kind of look at, but this, you're doing it blind. And so I start playing it. By the end, and it was perfect. By the end of the piece, I had forgotten where I was. So I just made something up and I walked off. Well, I came in second place because I forgot those last few bars. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because the music was flowing. I was bringing in the divine and I didn't win.
Isn't that something? Yeah. Anyway, how nice to travel lightly. That would be one I can take away, put on my t-shirt. That'd be a good one.
What do you think is the biggest takeaway from your broadcasting career? What would you say is priceless from that part of your life that you bring forward now?
I think the ability to interview people and get the best out of them. That's applied in so many scenarios. It's something I did as a producer back in the day. And then in these last 12, 13 years, after doing MBA, to transition to the TV business, which certainly failed for me. That ability to interview and get the best out of people. So there's something in there. And if I go all the way back, if you want to get back into sort of my early days, I wrote acting school, learning improvisation, combining all those things. That takes me back to the sort of early 90s, late 80s. Those skills come out in droves now. And funny enough, I have to be careful with them because I'm just really interested in the human condition, getting the best out of people at a given moment. And so I'll find myself, facilitating a nonprofit board meeting or working with a group of senior leaders in a business setting. And it's not acting class. Like that's real, it's real life. But because I'm so interested in getting at the root of what's going on, but sometimes that's a bit much for people to handle, even though that might be what the block is. And so I'm always looking for what's the root cause, how can we get there? So those skills can be a blessing and a curse depending on.
It's interesting when people aren't ready, when they aren't ready for it. And it's like, here you are, the universe has brought Gord in front of this person and he's using all of his gifts. And it's something that if they knew, they would kick themselves because it was right there, the thing that they needed all along. And that moment passed them by. And that's kind of the funny thing about life. But I was going to say that I think that this gift that you have of building natural rapport with people and getting the gold out, that translates not just to podcasting, but to your networking, to your events, to any kind of relationship building. That's a superpower.
Yeah, it's been fun. And what I was going to say, like when it works well, I spend 500 hours with a company. And at the end, I get comments like, thanks for bringing the laughter back into the hallways. That's a true story. Transformational work. So that ability to sort of work through the bulk of things, but occasionally get that one where it does knock it out of the park, makes it all worthwhile. So yeah, it's been fun to sort of pull that together and then be able to maybe use it a bit more with caution and care at the right moment. Because those folks that aren't ready, they're just not ready.
The thing that popped into my mind was cultural transplant. It's like you can take any horrible culture and just like bloop, cut it open, remove the cancer and boop, put the new thing in. And
if they've got a sliver of humility, I'm good to go and we can get that thing to really move. It's often very difficult though at the pace of business that people hit on. They don't slow down to do this work, which to me is very fundamental. It's not that you need to dwell on fundamental leadership, self-awareness work all the time. But if you don't do that work, that's often at the heart of communication issues, which is so fundamental to things that we do.
Do you find that these new people are saying this is the way we've always done it still, or have we transitioned past that old style of mentality?
I think people hate change. They just, you know what I mean? So anytime you're about to upset the status quo, you're in there, that's what's going on. And then their pace of absorption. So one of the ongoing scenarios, my mother-in-law is 81 years old. She's a retired therapist, love her to bits. She's off in Mexico doing cool things at a writer's conference right now. She'll say, Gord, people aren't ready to change until they're ready to change. And that's based on her professional experience. And I don't dispute that. The difficulty that I have from an organizational perspective is if these people are blocked by ego, whatever, the things that they're blocked by that are leadership or personality or those types of issues, and the organization is failing, then I feel that the need to go in and help move those things quickly. And it's often based on literally revenue going down, the profits evaporate. That's the kind of intervention moment that I get involved with often. And the ability to have a difficult conversation quickly so that they can not have to go another year, 2 years, or their business fails. So there's something in there, and I'm not right all the time. It's funny, I've tried in certain moments and not done well in bringing forward those things because people were simply never going to change. So I say it out loud as a reminder often in conversations to help myself balance out when to hit the gas with these superpowers, as you're mentioning, and when they're going to be actually useful for people.
Wait, I'm having a hard time hanging on. And I remember because I identify with that person who is not ready to change in that moment. Because when I went to be as a practice workshop in your practice workshop, I remember you looking at me and putting me on the spot. And in that moment, first of all, I burst into flames because that's just what I do. And then I froze. And I'm like, and I get the doe look in my eyes, like, so I feel like, are there people in organizations that you can recognize right away you don't belong here? Whereas if I'm going to put it harshly, I'm the cancer in the organization because I can't actually keep up. I can't think, and I need it slow, and I need something very different.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've had comments like that back, and it's a reflection of my own internal pace. And I have an over urgency to help people that again isn't applicable. So, like you just said, how do people need to absorb the information? Like you just said, like what's the best pace or timing or way to reach that person? And there's just certain folks that resonate quickly, like again, in terms of that are at that right speed. So I don't always kind of get that pace right. So I'm glad to be in a learning moment here to say, oh yeah, right. I have to remember that. You're talking about other lessons over time. I also have to learn, like I can talk all day long. My daughter always says if she got paid word by the minute or whatever from me, she'd be a jillionaire by now, kind of thing. So I'm glad to hear you reflect on that and say, because I'm not reaching everybody in the room all the time, but when I'm in the room in those moments that you're in, like that type of workshop setting, my urge is to give you as much information as possible because we're only together for an hour and a half. So I've got to get that information out. But what you're reflecting on is saying, well, if I had less, but the right information, it might be a better way in a sense to get it. So that's just sort of learning from my perspective. I just often am trying to get so many things across so that people can find 1, 2, 3 ways to walk out of the room and make a difference.
And I'm guessing that those high-level executives and other people that are contributing are probably, for the most part, able to keep up and dial in to that pace,
Yeah, and I hope that's the case. And then what's nice is hopefully the materials and the leave behinds, in a sense, are there for everybody. So when I was mentioning this format, because I've gotten feedback on the format, what is the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind a given thing? I now slow down to sort of explain those things. So when I say, like, because I've had that direct feedback of like, some people don't like the word win, they don't like the word strategy. So we slow down to find out what's the intention behind these things and then break down the language and get it to something that's useful for them. What strikes me about it though is in slowing down to talk to most 95% of people that I've used this format with get there really fast. And the sneaky part in Gord's world is it just pulls together a decade of work and an MBA, and it gets it into like minutes and gets that possibility of then finding common words that we can use in our business cultures, strategy, work plan, people, operation, results, and let that be the common language that we start to then build on together. Whereas I think often organizations don't have a common language. People are head down, they're doing their thing. Again, my interest in strategic planning and alignment through the organization is where a lot of this drives from. And it's crazy because I say now this tip of the iceberg that I'm just explaining in those 5 terms, there's a 650-page document that's underneath them. And it's all prompts and facilitated opportunities to go into each area of the business to make it stronger. So I come from this high complexity level and I'm working, and your feedback is good because I'm just working to simplify. I'm working to simplify. That's why I got down to tell me about your biggest win. And that has allowed the conversation to start way better than I used to. Back to lessons learned. I used to start at, hey, let me tell you about this thing. And I would talk for an hour and poor people would be pretty turned off. So I had to learn that lesson to be more accessible.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the biggest things is to get somebody to let their guard down, trust you, let you in.
Yeah.
And just have a conversation to begin with. When it's hard to be a superhero and want to save everybody and realize that not everybody wants to be saved.
Not yet. No, it's so true. And the one I'll give you to you and your audience is the next time you're at a networking event and you're meeting somebody for the first time, you can explain what you do. When they say, what do you do? Don't say what you do. Just say, when you go to ask them what they don't say, what do you do to them? Say, tell me about your biggest win in business in the last couple of years and why. And watch their eyes. They go up and to the left and they get into this really interesting part of their brain that's very authentic. And I'm just been, again, blessed with having spent the time to get it down to this simplified version, because it really kicks off the conversation quite well, which then leads to those other things that I want to do on a complex side. So it's been fun to pull the brand together and then find a way to make these things accessible.
Yeah, I was going to say, eyes up and to the left is when I do that, even on the podcast, when I do it now, I'm imagining, I'm thinking this. So as you're telling me that, I'm imagining it. So that's a great tell to look for.
Yeah.
What does it mean if the eyes go up to the right?
I don't know. Haven't seen that one yet, but maybe I'll run.
I think it's down and to the right. They're making up a lie. I think there's a book on that. And man, so I was going to ask you, Gord, before we get into reading and things like that, because I'm always fascinated by, you and I share a love of reading and things. So I want to get into that in a bit. But I want to say, what is your vision for corporate culture in the future? If you had it your way and you had to change things, what would your ultimate vision be for corporations?
I come from a very human perspective. I think we're all in. That's my hope for the world. And that's certainly a philosophy that I'll stand behind, even when the heavy lifting needs to be done. In these political times that we're in now, these divided times, my hope is that we're all in. And I think this me versus we, I would say I would advocate for we, because I think we can do better when we're all in. So that would be sort of my overall philosophy for things. So for corporate cultures, it's looking to then help uphold the organization, or in my case, I would say uphold the country, or uphold the rule of law, or these things that I would sort of say, philosophically. That would be my hope. So I would say we in corporate culture makes more sense, and it's a more humane approach. And there are people like Dan Price. I can't remember the name of his company. It's a tech company in California. And at one point, he just said, wow, I'm making lots of profits. I'm going to raise the minimum pay in my company to 70,000 US a year. It doubled some people's salaries, some administrators and this kind of thing. And suddenly they started to have babies and buy houses that were closer to work. Like, that kind of opportunity is there. It really takes a leadership that is in a we type of thinking. And those are the types of organizations that I admire. And I think it's kind of the only way to function, because even if you go in the sort of hardcore way to say, fine, you're only in it for profits, there still has to be a we component where I hope we're all in. So that would be my general philosophy around things, especially during these divided times. And I think what's unfortunate in our politics, for example, is we don't have 25 and 50-year leaders that have sort of a good plan to take care of all the issues. That we could debate the issues, that's fine, but I don't hear like a big plan. So we're stuck under these 4-year cycles that take us back and forth and make us mad and all those things. And I just hope that we can't be that divided, because the we part has gotten us this far, and it'll continue to do that, except to have to go through the ebb and flow of what we're doing. So yeah, for corporate stuff, it's trying to get folks to be thinking globally within their organizations. And if that's the way they serve their selfish needs, that's fine. Or if they're actually wanting to have a philosophy that, includes everybody all the way up and down the food chain, no matter what the size of the organization, then that's what I get super excited about.
I think that it's directly opposite. Like, your philosophy, your vision for corporate is so in opposition to the example of what we have in terms of systems from our politicians and our government. So there's no good example for us to constantly dial into. So the importance of your podcast and celebrating the wins so that it can be an example. So that becomes our standard of how we build corporate situations.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. That's neat to get that kind of reflection. And you're taking me back. I just got a direct guy sent me an email. He said, "Oh, listen to episode 2." And the second paragraph, I said, "Can I please use that as a testimonial? If I had it in front of me, I'd read it to you right now." But it was that very thing of like, "Oh, I just listened to this episode, and I love the way Karen Unland from Taproot Publishing, who you interviewed, talked about the importance of people and why she treats them that well. And I think everybody should do that. Please keep the podcast going." For just dialing into what you just said there. And I'm like, oh, because you've launched podcasts, you know what it's like in those early days, those early episodes. Am I on the right track? Is what's happening? And I've never had a simpler mandate for a podcast in terms of being able to say, well, if I can get wins from leaders and other leaders can win from them, that's the pebble in the pond, and we can get that ripple effect rolling around.
Yeah, I was going to say quickly, just getting back to politics, I wish that our political system was run more like a business that was trying to be profitable, that was trying to do the best for everyone in the corporation. Let's say Canada is a corporation and we're all employees. Why wouldn't we try and do the best? And like you said, meanwhile, every 4 or 5 years, complete change of management, there's no long-term plan. We can't keep going like this. So I'm going to nominate Gord for Prime Minister. And I'm sorry, but you're going to have to abandon your podcast. You're going to be running a country soon. But
Well, I think I just can't get enough of saying that, especially during these times. Like, I think I hope it's a we time. I think it's very much a me time. If I had to sort of characterize a lot of leaders, but this sort of benefit to the few and not for the many is in opposition to the way I guess I'd like things to be going. Circling back to your, what's your perspective on how you'd like things to be? And the countries, and certainly it's funny about leadership and organizations. I just think there are good organizations. I don't know that it's for-profit, not-for-profit government. I think things are well run or they're not. And hopefully we can take our organizational learnings and apply them in whatever the organization is.
so what do you think the most detrimental thing is to a corporation, and what should leaders be looking for, and how to root that out?
Wow, that's not a small question. I'll just stay where I'm focused. Leader lack of self-awareness, which I think causes a lot of destruction at all levels of a business, where they just don't have the self-awareness, or if they're Machiavellian, they do have the self-awareness and they know they're being not nice to people. There's just so many swaths of poor leadership from lack of self-awareness, which then leads to a poor outcome for the organization. They might benefit, you know what I mean, in the short term or whatever, but there's not a poor outcome for the organization, and the organization suffers. So that's back to that me, we type of thing. I know of, in nonprofit settings alone, I could name 4 improper exits from ego-driven boards, which is just useless, like just useless behavior from people that are involved in small nonprofits. They're involved 20 hours a year, 30 hours a year. They come into a few meetings a year and they make decisions that impact the organization, which flows through to their clients and that kind of thing, that are bad decisions. And I know leaders that are out of the game for being mistreated by those things. And what's it from? It's from ego in a given 2-hour meeting. And so that's just one example of real life, I wish I could be there all the time to make it better, to balance that out so the organization wins. And it's not about somebody being upset in a given moment. And when we have leaders that then get knocked out of where they should be, doesn't make sense.
That's a great answer. And I was thinking so small. I was thinking, disgruntled employee or saboteur, but really there's way more destruction in a bad leader. You could lose a lot of really good people. And that's a gem for me to take away. I was like, oh, wow. For some reason I was thinking small, and it really is much
for me,
bigger.
Philosophically, it gets into where can I make the biggest impact? And I've worked with all different levels of organization. I've worked with frontline and managers and those types of things. That's not where I can make the biggest impact. If I can get that leader functioning at their highest level, hopefully benevolently in a sense, but they don't have to agree with me, just getting them optimized. So the folks I love working with are sort of Olympic athletes, really good at what they're doing. They're often very good at technical and sales, but this thing of rounding them out so that they become outstanding leaders of people, that gets super exciting.
You know what I would say about that mindset of the Olympic athlete is that they're very balanced in terms of their masculine and feminine. So they have that masculine drive of action and planning and strategy and stuff, but then they're balanced by the feminine, where they do the meditation work, they go inward, they visualize, they slow it down. I think that bringing the masculine feminine balance is so important for leaders.
I love the way you're pointing that out too. Again, getting back into male, female, maybe stereotypes. That's a great way to sort of pull it together and gives accessibility to, if Brene Brown calls it vulnerability, we say feminine, masculine, again, one of those full set of traits that make us, I'm going to hope, human. It's so funny. I always want to be in a Star Trek episode like 1,000 years from now. That's the male, female thing, and all these dividers are not as divisive. Not that they won't maybe always be, but certainly lesser than the baggage that we carry through all these different ways to divide. I would hope that we can get through them better. So that chance to balance out feminine, like I'm curious, like when you say feminine, masculine, what's an example of each that would go well into a leader from your perspective?
I feel like for me, a really good masculine would be creating a safe space for everybody to thrive and bring forth everybody's unique gifts. That's still that we mentality, but it brings specific things forward and unites them. And so there's that very masculine safe space holding, and then the feminine to just drop in and reflect and create. So the visionary stuff that comes in a little bit more there. That's kind of how it feels for me.
Yeah, and I love where that goes. And, there's 40,000 years of philosophy that just drop underneath that nice eloquent way that you've said that. And that's the type of conversation I'm like, oh, neat. Like, how do we get more of that in a leader? And it's funny, I don't see it as male, female. I like masculine, feminine as traits of like, what is a leader? And so it's funny these days, there's a big trend certainly around female leadership development. Not that's a bad thing all around, other than just want to be, again, a couple hundred years ahead into that place where we are leaders would be my hope.
Yeah, the pendulum thing, right? Like there was that time where everyone was complaining it was a man-dominated environment, and then it swung way the other way, and now there's this crazy woman-led thing that's still not balanced. You have to be able to bring it back here. It's not about man-woman. It's about the energies of masculine, feminine.
Yeah, and
the cultures.
Bravo, like, let's get more of that in the world. Like, it just makes sense to me the way you're sort of pulling it together.
Yeah, and if we have more people like Gord helping with cultures and making these places thrive and make it a safe place where people can be creative and be their best selves to make corporations better, everybody in that big company benefits from that. That's a huge win for everyone in that corporation. Why wouldn't we want more corporations like that?
Yeah, and the challenge that I have out to most conversations I have with people over 60 now, even if I just met them, is what do you want this place to look like for your grandkids? Because they have the benefit of being alive and being 60 plus at this moment in time in history in North America. And so for those who are successful, of the percentage of them that want it to be a we world, because they don't all want to, how do we just sort of engage them with the sort of energy they have left to support where Kati's taking us in that conversation to get more of that, so we can develop that type of leadership that is going to carry these organizations forward?
Now, is that going to make it easier for the next generations to come into leadership roles?
I hope so. And it's funny, succession planning is horrible. Like no one's slowing down to transfer their knowledge. And so they've got the benefit of these 3 and 4 decades to build a business, become a president, become a leader, but they're not slowing down to, I always say this, and again, I'm not sure if it's my place to say it, but it sort of makes the point. I think we can blame Nelson Mandela for not naming a successor. 30 years in the making, unbelievable story, Robben Island, what he did changed the country, but he didn't change the country permanently, and he didn't leave enough behind to strengthen the continuity of what he had earned over those many decades. So I don't know, again, it is my place to comment on that, other than to say, I think there's so many, we're often leader driven. You know, we are, whatever, the names come up all the time, and whether it's Nero or Churchill, take your pick. But how do we get into the transfer of the knowledge so that these young leaders can benefit from what they're going to benefit from? Although I think I'm hearing quite a bit too of older people just getting frustrated, checking out. And I think young people are just going to invent their own game, which may be another historical repeat that we may benefit from or not. I don't know. Work-life balance. Certainly younger people aren't having the 90-hour weeks that older people put in. So that might be a good thing. But on the other hand, are there some lessons that, folks that are got to get those lessons, did they transfer them forward? And funny enough, I've been asked in the WINS format now to start to do more of that. How can we take your interview format, unpack a leader from just from their WINS perspective in a structured way? And this is the thing too, I think, about succession planning that's very difficult. Or you could be recording your family tree. If there's no structure for the conversation, then it's hard to know what to ask. It gets a bit rambly. So then it's hard on the listener in terms of what they're taking in. So how can we have a structured conversation to carry forward to get those younger leaders engaged in a way that they can absorb it at the right pace? But in the meantime, the macro indicators are, if we don't do the succession planning, and then it's trillions of dollars of wealth and knowledge loss that will simply evaporate. And maybe that's, again, been historical, I don't know, but my little bits here and there, if I can get someone in front of me and, again, encourage them in a moment to go forward, then that's something I do intentionally.
I think
and the big thing that I take away from that story, dear, is that there's the structure piece. Now, so this whole episode, I'm like, okay, I love your earth energy. How do I ground into it? What am I looking for? And you said it. As soon as you said structure, I lit up. I'm like, there it is. That's Gord, because we have these Gen X, I think that's our kids, right? Who are just coming into these.
We're Gen X.
Gen Z?
Yeah, they're Gen Z.
Kids?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have millennials and Gen Z. They're coming up into these positions of leadership, and they're really able to tap into their inner world a lot easier than I think we were. Like, they have access to all of this new energy, but without the structure, I think that new energy has potential to sweep them away, that they'll just get lost in it. So the grounding into the structure is so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? And so when you look at these powerful pillars that we're putting into this conversation, masculine, feminine in a leader, a structured approach to not leadership transfer, those are building blocks. Those are, to me, I'll go back to my sort of take on things. Those are organizational building blocks that if we can get those in place intentionally, a little or a lot, and something in there too is just around the structure is just common language. And I'm not stuck on my language. I mean, I understand it. I know where it's based. I can take it to the literature and say why. But what is our common language that we're going to use? So if I say the word win, do we agree on the word win? Or do we just need to have a little conversation about it and say, oh, you know what, we want to call it achievements? Great. Because I've heard people object in that way. But what is that common language in the structure that we can agree on pretty quickly? And also then have the tolerance to allow for, well, I don't like the word win, but I'm going to go with it for now because I know we need to get something done. And this is the other thing about, there's something in there too about pace. Organizations don't have time. And as we see again politically, things can change fast. And the way you thought things were can really change fast. And so again, time is another one of those pieces in there. So we heard leadership, structure, and time, that's in there.
I think one of the biggest
fluidity too.
Right. I think one of the biggest golden takeaways that I got from you, Gord, while you were talking, is that people need to get over the limited thinking, the competitive thinking, and put into place a succession plan, and just have it be standard for ex-managers, whatever it be, whatever the triggers are, your age, or let's say a new person's coming in, but to actually have a succession plan inserted into it so there is no surprise, and to not worry about losing. Let's say, you know, Jimmy with 20 years, you're training him to be VP, and now he's got all this knowledge and he's going to go out on his own. We can't worry about the what ifs, that if the culture is that good and you've worked hard, you've earned your shot at, you know, that next step, and we're going to provide that mentorship for you or things like that. To me, that would be a huge thing for every company to have. That way the managers know, that way the employees know that this is in, and if you're doing a great job, you will be rewarded with that opportunity. I think that's an exciting opportunity. Totally.
And again, for me, it breaks down even further to saying, do you have 3 hours to have this structured conversation? Let's have that conversation. So many people are just putting out fires every day thinking they're on, you know, and they're not necessarily on the most important issues. It's really, coaching's really easy. I mean, it's not, but coaching's really easy because you're like, why are you doing that? And then they're like, someone will say to me, I had a leader say to me, with our leadership team, we've never had an annual 1 day off to reflect. And I'm like, how come? Well, it's always been that way. Oh, we're too busy. And then just chip away at that for a little bit. And she's like, oh, and then she's smiling because she's like, oh, I've planned the day and we're going to do the thing and we're getting away. So this thing of like, how are you using your time right now to take action on what you're saying, Alex, this idea of get it done. And I say, get it done. So this thing of, if you've got an hour, great, that's enough. If there's 5 hours, good. And you know, those longer periods of time, depending on what it is, but there's something about the unpacking and getting it down that if it can get done in a structured way. And funny enough, in dealing with artificial intelligence now, I've in the background very lightly, just in early exploratory conversations, I'd actually like to have a chat bot on the computer. It could have my face or be a character, but it would take the best of my ability to interview and then just interview somebody so that this actually gets out. So you just talk to the computer in a more natural way, but those preset questions and structure is in there. So then we extract the information and that actually leads to real data. And that real data is applicable on a go forward way. And this is taking advantage of maybe the best of what AI can be at this moment in time to replace what is ideally human interaction. But back to what you're saying, Alex, there is they don't often invest. People don't see necessarily the investment being valuable for the succession type of conversations unless they think they're going to get something from it.
But this is where, and it came to me too, and I always have these great lightning storms to my brain when we're talking. You have, not meetings, but you have a course on meeting efficiency and meeting effectiveness. And
Yep.
if you take, let's say, 3 months worth of crappy meetings, all that wasted time, get rid of that, you've opened up probably 10 times more time needed to do the mentorship or to do the succession planning workshops or to have that day of reflection that they were talking about. If you could tie those two together in a company, bang, you've just solved 2 problems.
It's stunning. I delivered a workshop recently, a half day, 14 senior leaders in a room, I punched out as much as I could with those people. And it all pulls back. There's sort of a suction back to status quo. And I often say, is status quo okay? And people are like, no. I'm like, great. So what are we going to do about it? And then all these other complications start to come in around status, who's who. I often now direct right at the senior leader in a room now. I don't worry about egos and stuff. I'm like, what are you going to do about it? Because you said you wanted to do something about it. I've just been here for 3 hours teaching you from my book called The Meeting Leadership Solution. I gave you the PDF. There's 180, there's a book in there. All the information's there. What are you going to do about it? Because what you're saying to me is because you're not managing your time well in your daily meetings, especially with the online craziness these days, you're working at night and on the weekends. And that's most places. Healthcare is brutal. Mm-hmm. Some people are in 30 meetings a week. They don't get to go to the bathroom during the day. Like, it's just insane. So to be the lucky objective outsider to say, I'm not in the family, how can we get this to be better? And which dials back into then what are we focused on right now? And why are we doing this and not doing that? That objective outsider that I often get to say is not being in the family helps people to realize that faster. That's the benefit of certainly having a strong coach, facilitator. You're just not caught up in your own stuff because I'll call it out.
You said the word family. So now I'm wondering, with your exquisite set of gifts and tools, if you were not doing business, if you were not in the corporate world, do you think you could have been doing family therapy, psychology? Because it seems like, I mean, you're kind of doing the same thing. You're getting to the root of the problem and offering solutions and offering the follow-through help.
I think if I knew I was going to live to 200, I'd jump right back into a psychology degree. I love it. I love where you're going. And what's funny is the reason I go there is from working as an actor and studying as an actor a long time ago. It's all about human condition. The acting schools didn't have any guardrails on them. So you got into these crazy scenarios where you're exploring yourself and you're going through all a range of emotions because you're trying in that case to present a character. The applicability is just, it's human condition. And so you're exactly right. It's funny. I've thought about that very thing. And there's something about organizational psychology. It would be an organizational psychology approach is what it would be. And Adam Grant, I think, is the fellow that's famous in that space who writes and does all kinds of things in that area. So yeah, if I can fit in another degree, that'd be cool. I was doing MBA at 42, transitioning out of the TV business. And I was just giggling, writing midterms. I couldn't believe I was back in there. And the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing now is there was a consultant who taught a couple classes and he drew up the org structure on the board, which I then was just like stunned and going, oh, you can do that. You can strengthen organizations? Okay, I'll do that. And that's what I do.
It's definitely fun to learn when you want to learn it.
Right?
Right. 100%. Yeah. And I think that the other thing, like, yes, you are extremely brilliant. You like to get into the structures in the organization, but the part of the psychology that really rings true for me is this calm, safe, gentle space that you provide. So even when I was in the middle of that workshop and it was flying by me, I didn't want to run because it was like you provide this space of calm and secure. And I know that I'm okay, even if it's coming at me as fast as it is. So creating that space, I think, is also one of your superpowers.
Thank you. I love hearing that. And I'm glad that you felt that. And I'm glad that I've been able to repeat that often for people, which creates the accessibility rapidly. And again, I'm back to my theme, which is pace of business in terms of dealing with that. And we can't uncouple, I don't think, the personal from the business. Like leadership is a 360 deal. So I'm glad to hear that you had that experience. And that's a gift for me because I work on that. Like I work on trying to dial that in. And so I'm glad to hear it worked.
Awesome. Okay. So I got a couple fun questions for you, Gord, before we get to the last one, but we're almost out of time. It went too fast. We're going to have to bring you back again. There's too much gold with you. So I love asking you questions like this, and I'm going to put you on the spot. So I want to know what your favorite nonfiction book is and why. Right now, what's your favorite one?
If I had to go fast, besides naming 20, where I'd have to find the list and run back to that bookcase back there, Who Not How is a really good one.
Okay.
And it's this thing of getting away from the how type of thinking and getting into who do I need to be connected to get things done. I really appreciated that one. Quit by Annie Duke. She was a world poker player, championship winner. This idea of when to stop, really valuable, especially in early startup business concepts where people get in too deep and they don't have the ability to go, oh, I better stop doing this. So giving you some perspective on it's okay to stop. And it's funny because it's very counterintuitive to our, I'm going to do it till I drop.
That's not the lady that was a skier, was it?
Pardon me?
Was that the lady that was a skier?
In this case, I don't know if she was. Her name is Annie Duke, and I know for the context that I understand is that she was a poker player.
Okay. There's another poker player I'm thinking about. Me and Kati saw her at what's his name? Tony Robbins event. Anyway,
Cool.
They tried to murder her because she was running a gambling thing. Anyway, but it makes for a great movie on Netflix as well. But there was a book, and it just made me think of her. So I was wondering if she wrote like a separate book. Anyway, favorite fiction book and why? Something that you just love to read, and maybe you haven't read it more than once.
Favorite fiction book? Gosh, there's so many. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which I think I read, I don't know, 2019. And I don't remember a ton about it other than there's a phrase in there that I remember reading at the time that stuck forever, and I still think about it, which is, it's the thought that wears them down. That's a phrase out of there that sort of struck me thematically over the years that I just sort of, I just can't kind of get away from it in terms of what it was.
It is a fascinating book.
Yeah, good stuff. And it's funny about just fun ones like Lord of the Rings, which I remember getting into and really enjoying the whole trilogy. That was super sort of easy reading. And then I've been reading so much, I've just got nonfiction on the top of my mind right now. If you gave me 10 minutes, I'd come back with a great list, but those are a couple that popped to mind.
That's cool. That's great. And what's funny is I haven't finished that book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, but the dad reminds me so much of me. But at the same time, he has the son and he's kind of a pain in the ass. And I just want to would you stop complaining? Because they're supposed to be on this motorcycle trip together. But the dad is so like me, where he's troubleshooting and very scientific, and you got this kid and he's just a kid, and I gotta keep reminding myself that I gotta be patient. And I find myself warring with myself as I read that book, and maybe that's why I haven't finished it yet, but it's on the shelf, and it is fascinating to see my strengths and my weaknesses on paper.
Isn't that lucky in a sense? Like to, pick up a book and get that kind of self-reflection. That's super cool.
I guess so. As I'm being tortured, I'm like, I'll read this later. But yeah, anyway, Kati, do you want to ask Gord the special question of the day?
Yeah, so our current guest always leaves a question for the next guest, which means our last person left a question for you. And it's a little awkward because it's just very assuming that you think we're geniuses, but here we go. What is Alex and Kati's secret to being such a pair of geniuses?
Ease would be the word that comes to mind quickly around sort of having worked mainly with Alex. I haven't worked with Kati as much, but there's an ease about getting into starting to work with you, which then revealed the good stuff, which sort of, helped me a lot. And certainly the website work that I needed done, that really helped. So there's I would just say the ease, which then makes it very accessible to get a lot of good quality work done.
Nice.
I can see that. I mean, our goal really is to be human and straightforward and approachable so that we can cultivate those relationships and help in any way that we can. Now, whether that's through website work or just talking somebody through something, that's really all we want to be doing.
Because we're superheroes too.
So then, Gord, what would be your question for the next guest?
Can it be literally any question?
Yeah.
Any question.
What do you want Canada to be?
They're probably Americans.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's okay.
Yeah, depending on where they're from.
It's okay if they say.
If you had to rephrase that and they say, "What do you want your country to be?" What do you want your country to be in 30 years?
Oh, that's a cool question.
There you go. That's the way. That's very top of mind for me these days, and because I think we're in a time that on all sides of all issues, there's just so much more heavy lifting to be done than anybody wanted at this moment in time. And so asking people like, what do you want? I'm really curious about, because it can't be passive. There's nothing passive going on anymore.
I really love that question. I'm actually probably going to go to bed thinking about that question tonight. I think that's so important, and I think that more people need to do that because we're so fixated on the next 4 years or the next 5 years. We're just conditioned.
There's bigger fish to fry, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw a video of water main break in Detroit, cars frozen lake. So we could talk about infrastructure alone not being addressed.
Right.
Take your issue. Doesn't matter what it is. Do you know what I mean? So that thing of live for now, don't pay for it later. My kids are 23 and 21, and I'm interested in doing my best to help them have the best place that they can have. But they're born at the wrong time to buy a house, and they're born at the wrong time for, a lot of these bigger issues. And who would have thought destabilization and conflict? We didn't learn enough from a couple world wars.
Right.
And so here we go. So then when I say that, and I don't say it with fear, I say it with hope for the individual efforts that people can make in their lives, and even to be thoughtful about that kind of question, because I think we haven't been, but we have to be. And it doesn't matter to me where you sit on the issues. What do you want it to be? What's that look like? And what's that design in a sense that people have in mind? It's bigger than our politics. It has to be.
I think everybody that's, let's say, 16, 17, 18 and older needs to start contributing and putting that energy towards changing things, because we can't keep going with inflation the way it's going. Like $20 hot dogs. We sound like our grandparents. Like, when I was your age, we had like $1 hot dogs, and now it's, $15, $20 for a Happy Meal or a Big Mac meal or something at McDonald's. Like, just continuing to raise the minimum wage doesn't do anything. We have to address the unaffordability issues here. Canada's got probably way more problems than America does, as far as, I mean, I would encourage my kids to probably move to America and start there and try and buy a house. It's probably more affordable than here, but at the same time, I don't want them to hit the escape button. I want us to all be part of the solution, not just run away. And
the solutions are there. It's just there's going to have to be a will to do it. So, and I think the will is not necessarily, it's beyond the importance of voting.
Yes.
It's in this conversation. It's in our daily influence. It's in those things. And folks, no matter, again, which side of the issues you're on, people are going to take to the streets. That's where we're headed. Now, whatever, like there are other times when people have had to take to the streets. We're about to move into that type of era. It's coming rapidly. Again, no matter which side of the issues you're standing on, that's coming up. And so as we go through this ebb and flow again, I love that kind of question. I just can't get enough of it these days, because it's asking of people who are, on TikTok and playing video games to stop and go, oh, I need to think about that now. And whether or not, like you said, the 16, 17, 25-year-olds or whatever, oh, I don't want to think about that. Doesn't matter what I say. Then they're just going to be rolled over, in a sense, by the people that will take advantage of this. So if I get back to a we, where we're all in, we got some basics, like just where you're going on the inflation question of like everybody gets to, that's certainly where I would head with hoping to influence that conversation.
I love that.
And while your kids may not have been born into a time where they can buy a house, they were born into a time where they're the ones who have it on their shoulders to bring forth the new evolution of human. So the evolution of human, where we get to fuse this and that to create this more unified, more we environment. And you providing the structure so that they can flow within that structure. You're the riverbanks. And then we have to trust that if we've done our job in forming those riverbanks, that they're going to flow through there and bring forth exactly what they're supposed to.
Completely with you. And the other piece that I'll add in there is retired people are off the hook. I think they are. But they've got anybody 60 to 75, 80, got a bit of breath left in them before sort of, natural life takes over. Their engagement is necessary. But what I'm hearing is a lot of hands up in the air. I did my bit. I'm done. There's a mental construct that they're done, and they're not, because of those grandchildren and children. And so that's something that I think is important. So riverbanks, there's one I get to steal from you for my t-shirt. That's awesome.
There's something to be said about the fact that the elders need to step into their role with authority and acceptance and reverence and sacredness, because in a society without elders, where are we going?
Right.
You have to have the wisdom and the mentorship that only the elders can bring forward.
I completely agree. And again, when we look at it organizationally, what's happening is when these 20-year people are leaving for whatever reason they're leaving, and the young people are stepping in. You could track social work alone as an example, where there's not senior people are just because they bled for it. I always say that when my sister's worked in it for 33 years, 32 years. And I always say I got my master's in social work over the years on the phone with her. But she worked frontline, hardest cases in Montreal. Paid a price, didn't have a family and all that kind of stuff, but she certainly has these proud moments with these families that she did help, and just she'll talk your ear off for all the good that she did helping those people. But that's an example of one profession where young people are being moved into management roles that just don't even have any close to the experience that they need to be able to manage at an optimal level, certainly the way things were done before. So love where you're going with the elder thing. I think that's applicable in so many different ways. And I'm sad for these current times, maybe where tolerance has been dialed down a bit for the progress that we got a chance to learn from different cultures, bringing in elder wisdom from many thousands of years from all different sources. That's being dialed down a bit too much for my likings these days, because there's still a lot of learning to be done there to mix those things in as much as possible.
My big t-shirt moment from you, Gord, was if the government won't listen, we will make them. I like that.
Yeah, and it's so funny about there's a pioneering aspect, I think, in this that people don't want to deal with. The government should take care of me. I get whatever. Zero taxes. I do nothing. They do everything for me. I'm fine. There's a pact between getting together, and the pact has to do with whatever, roads and laws and those things. And when you start to loosen all that pact too much, we're going to see some outcomes. And, I was telling, what was the story? There's a book called A Force More Powerful. It's about passive resistance. And so if you're in India and you don't like British ruling you anymore, you start to do these things that take back power in a sense. And that's one way to go about sort of seeding things. And in that same book, there's a story about in Chile, where there was a leadership at one point where poor people used to get rainwater off their roofs, so they had some water, had no running water. And the dictator at that point taxed the rainwater. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
It sounds like something Canada would do.
Right. And then suddenly you're into a mass movement of change. And I think it'll be interesting to see how we go again. And I don't mean to sort of take a side on an issue. I just mean to say whatever issues you're supporting is going to take a mass movement to kind of get things going through as we move that forward. But I like that elder comment about gaining the wisdom and getting it in and retaining it, because that clock is ticking so fast. Like, we just know, especially as parents, we know how fast these times go by. So it's actually a now issue rather than, oh, that'll happen later. We've been lucky in North America. I always say you punch the lottery ticket if you're born in Canada, just because generally it's generally a safe place. It's generally a decent place to live, as opposed to guys I've met from Lagos, Nigeria, who had to duck behind bushes for gunfire when they're going to school, or the guy I met from, I think it was next door to Vietnam, Cambodia, where there were soldiers living in his house, teachers telling him to tell on his parents for the Communist Party. Like,
crazy.
I don't know if I know hard when I meet those people.
Right. I think that if you're coming into this world, whether it's corporate or not, in the energy of gratitude, this is the only way forward. So that's the perfect place to end the podcast, is on this beautiful note of gratitude.
Love it.
Thanks, Gord. Where can everyone find you?
ExecutiveWins.com. That's the website. That'll start the whole food chain, or it's Gord Sheppard on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And make sure you check out Gord's podcast, because, I mean, just from an hour of being with him, we got so many golden nuggets. And
the Executive Wins podcast, there's just sort of so many leadership lessons on there I'm super proud of. And thank you for the time today. And thanks for the opportunity to be on yours. And I'm glad to see where you're taking this.
Yeah, it was fun. And leveling up. We don't have to be perfect. We just got to keep leveling up. And that's it. So we will see everybody next time. And thank you, Gord, for spending some time with us. We'll see you.